Hello and welcome to Bits and Atoms, the Grisham Robotics Founder Series. I'm your host, Elias Can, and today I've got Johnny Longden, co-founder and CEO of TeraSort, joining me. To get started, Johnny, would you mind sharing a quick intro about you and TeraSort?
Of course. No, thanks, Elias, and thanks for having me. So I'm Johnny. I'm founder of TeraSort. We are a Manchester-based climate tech company building a fully robotic modular recycling unit. And really what we're trying to do is help reduce the cost, improve the performance of recycling, and ultimately with our overall mission is to help maximize the amount of material we do recycle and minimize the amount that goes to landfill and incineration. So the team is myself and Phil, who's the technical side of the two of us. I'm an engineer by background, but since then I've worked across the waste industry in a variety of different roles and consulting and startups. And yeah, really excited to be here. And I was lucky enough to be part of the first cohort of the Grisham Robotics Accelerator here in London and meet everyone there. So yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we loved having you for it. And great, let's jump into some questions. Maybe just to get started, a little bit more about you personally. What originally motivated or inspired you to take the leap and become a founder?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess for me, for kind of, as long as I can remember, it's ultimately been the goal. So, I've done a few different things, but ultimately this was always the end state that I was working to. And I think the reason for that is a couple of things. I mean, for me, there's a part of it that's, I think, the desire to build something for myself. There's part of it that is around kind of enjoying and really being energized by the startup chaotic environment. That's kind of where I want to be. But also for me and for what we're doing, I guess, it's a climate tech company at heart. And what I've always wanted to do is have some kind of impact on sustainability with what I'm doing. And I think building something and building what we're trying to do here with the waste problem is probably the best way that I can have that impact. And so, yeah, it's a variety of factors, but it feels, it's exciting to take the leap. And it's always been the plan.
Absolutely. And it sounds like, a really strong kind of like innate, intrinsic, like almost realization of kind of what you've wanted to do. And I love the focus on climate tech as well. And you kind of partially actually started to touch on it, and maybe just to go a little bit further, I'm curious with TeraSort, how did you land, and for you personally, specifically within climate tech, on redesigning recycling? What motivated you to focus there specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, I think kind of waste management and to a wider extent, kind of circularity and the circular economy is what I've been interested in for a while. And I think going back to my kind of uni engineering days, it's the problem that always most stood out. And I think it's interesting for a couple of reasons. It's partly because it's kind of such a constant of life is the production of waste and the complexity of dealing with that. And it's something that's always changing and at the moment always increasing. And so it's kind of, it's just a big global problem that needs to be managed. And alongside that, I mean, it's for me, fascinating combination of both the engineering side and the physical and the kind of more dirty environment, trying to understand that. But alongside that, it's also a commercial problem. It's also a behavior problem. And it's a sort of whole holistic problem that's really interesting to work on. And I think that's kind of initially was the interest in waste. But I think how we landed on what we're trying to do now is, and this is something that Phil and myself kind of saw before we met and how we kind of came to this, but it's a significant opportunity at the moment from a combination of the massive cost reductions in robotics and advances in AI, both in terms of making it easier to build and train computer vision models, but also, just control and direct and build fully optimized systems. And we think that has an opportunity, and I think you see it across a whole load of different industries, but in the waste industry, it has an opportunity to kind of make a transformative change and unlock a whole new set of ways of doing things that maybe weren't possible before, when robotics were more expensive and when the technical side of it was more expensive to develop. And so, yeah, really, I think it's an opportunity now to make some quite wholesale changes about how we manage the waste, and hopefully massively reduce the cost for waste managers, but also solve some of the other challenges around flexibility and future proofing and labor challenges and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I'd love to double click on the challenges piece that you mentioned, because maybe for folks who are listening and viewing as well, who are less familiar with how waste management is handled today, what facilities look like, what that process kind of is like, I'd be curious to double click and learn a bit more, because you mentioned as well the volume's growing, so there's more people globally. We use a lot of products daily, weekly, monthly, and yeah, there's been this cost reduction in AI and robotics as well. And so when you're thinking about the facilities today, like, would love to dive a little bit more in terms of how they operate today and where you see the opportunity there.
Yeah, so, and I mean, I guess how waste is handled and how recycling is done in different countries does have some differences, but there's a lot of similarities across it. And I think in the UK, sometimes one of the misconceptions can be that the recycling that gets collected isn't sorted, or, you know, it doesn't necessarily matter what happens to it. That's not necessarily true. The waste that gets collected for recycling in the UK does get sorted, and it gets sorted at facilities that's often out of sight for a lot of people outside the industry. But that sorting process is difficult. It's complicated. Everything in the in the bin, or every piece of recycling waste, is a irregular edge case. No one piece looks exactly like the last one. And so when it comes to sorting that waste into the single material outputs that you need in order to reuse it as a raw material, that process can look very complicated. And so it tends to be done in large industrial facilities. You have complex mechanical engineering setups, you have multi-step processes, and even across the automated facilities, you still have manual labor, because that, you know, as I mentioned, everything's a slight edge case, and so you need to be able to pick up the stuff that the equipment doesn't solve, or things that might damage the equipment. And yeah, so all of that, I guess, kind of comes together to say that complexity drives cost. So the recycling sorting process, whilst you are generating valuable raw material outputs that can be reused, it is an expensive process to sort them. And what that does is it makes it harder to, you know, deploy new capacity. It makes it harder to change capacity. It makes it harder to make recycled materials cost competitive with virgin materials. And I think what we want to do with TeraSort is, and what we want to use the advances in AI and the cost reductions in robotics to do, is to simplify the mechanical elements of the process, so that you can reduce that fixed cost of equipment, of operation, move some of the complexity into the software, and by doing so, enable significantly lower cost sorting, but also, because we can add flexibility, enable not just lower cost sorting, but the ability to sort more dynamically, so that you know what waste is coming in, and you know what reprocessors down the line are looking for. You can sort kind of, I guess, dynamically to the material specification that people want, and you can adapt in real time to any changes in the waste stream. And I think that's one of the other sort of constants of waste, is that the composition is always changing. And so being able to adapt to it, both right now for kind of daily fluctuations in the waste composition, but also for, 5 years down the line, if there's new materials, or if there's material changes in what it is that we throw away, your sorting capacity can adapt to that, and you don't have to go and change around a facility or do a retrofit of your existing facility.
Yeah, and I'm sure the existing facility layout can be moderately complex, challenging to do any kind of like retrofitting to it as well. And you led in nicely too with some of the ways that you're looking to ease some of the challenges with what you're building at TeraSort. I'd be curious too, because there's pure play software products that folks can spin up easily and ship, and now with AI product generation as well, like what used to take maybe a few weeks can take a couple of hours. I think for you, obviously, what you're building towards with TeraSort is going to look and be a much different process than what a pure play software product will look like. Maybe for folks and the audience as well, like what are some of the key roadmap and kind of like checkpoints for you to say, like, here's how we're staging product development at TeraSort?
Yeah, so yeah, inevitably we have a hardware element, and that shipping process and that build process doesn't look fully like software. What we are always trying to do, and what we've been trying to do with our product development, is keep the physical and hardware elements as standardized and off the shelf as possible. We want to be overlaying the control and the intelligence to direct this, but we want to minimize the amount of bespoke equipment that we're using, because the whole idea and requirement is to reduce the cost, and also to make use of advances in robotics as and when they come, so that we can bring in new lower cost robots and improve robots as they become available. When it comes to development, I guess for us, the stages they kind of follows the natural evolution towards that full unit that we're building, which I guess you can think of in terms of shape and size. It's a shipping container, 10 to 20 robots, integrated hopper, sorting mixed waste directly into single material outputs. And so going through the phases, we've gone through kind of from the single robot demonstrator in the early phase to the first multi-robot system, and using that first multi-robot system with just a couple of robots to really get down that sorting process and optimize it, get the robots working together. And then the next step is really that MVP unit, to get it into a live waste site, learn what we need to do, what we need to learn about the process and operating in the field, and take that learning to develop the full commercial unit that we can then roll out. So it goes through stages. I think we want to move quickly because we think there's an opportunity here, and we think that as we try and use as much standardized componentry, we can reduce the lead time. But yes, hardware always adds complexity.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really interesting to hear about those milestones and the progression, though, because it makes sense. You're like building up at each moment of time to something bigger and proving along the way, the whole way, that you can create that shipping container size product, because it's not like you would go out and do that for day one, because it's a huge, expensive, time consuming build to have like too many unknowns and variables around it.
Yeah, exactly. Each different kind of size element brings its own aspects of the kind of technical side to focus on. And so I think that staging allows us to break down the technical challenges into those kind of blocks, and each one brings on a new challenge to overcome, but yeah, we're not trying to do it all at once.
Yep. And maybe to switch gears a little bit here, I'm curious to get your thoughts so far, and since I know you're on the fundraising side right now, what's been some of your best strategies for finding potential investors so far? How does that process look for you? Curious to get your experience and feedback on it so far.
Yeah, so I mean, it is an intensive process. It has been an intensive process. I think the advice that we got from Dimitri at the start of the accelerator, and kind of the general advice, that warm introductions, and certainly introductions from founders in a certain investor's portfolio, are the most powerful way to reach investors, and to start on kind of the right footing, where you have there's an understanding of what you're trying to do. There's an understanding of kind of a sign of credibility of who you are and what you're trying to do. So that really has been one of the focuses for us, is to understand, within people that we know, within people who have had investment from other places, whether it is possible for them to introduce us to that investor, whether they would be willing to, whether they believe in what we're trying to do enough to want to make that introduction. So that is a part of it. I think alongside that, being a relatively kind of early in both of our startup journeys, there is also, we also want to do our own colder outreach where required, so that we make sure that if there is a fund that we really like and we don't necessarily know someone who can introduce us, that we are at least at least making that outreach. So yeah, an intense process, a focus on introductions, but covering kind of all of the bases.
Yeah. Warm leads are great. Like you said, whether from other VCs, like the VC to VC intro or the founder to VC intro, it's usually, I've found as well on the investor side, a big help having kind of like a little social proof of it coming from somebody, like respect, things like that. So that can definitely help. And, one thing from your answer as well that kind of sparked a question for me too, because you mentioned the mission piece, and I'm curious from some of the investors that you've spoken with already, maybe there's some that are more mission aligned, maybe there are some that are more maybe just pure play traditional financial return folks, maybe some people who are kind of a blend in between. Like, do you notice or get a sense early on when you're speaking with them where they kind of sit in that like mission to financial return spectrum typically?
I think to an extent, and I think the extremely mission-driven investors normally, it's normally, their core thesis is normally a sort of known part of what they want to do. And yes, it changes, it can change to an extent what areas of what we're trying to do we focus on. But, for us, we always believe that that by having a kind of core sustainability action in what we're trying to do in terms of, if we successfully recycle material, we can divert it from landfill and incineration, that the way we can measure, or the way we're going to get the sustainability impact we want, is by the commercial returns and the scaling that we want to do. So we're kind of never, the sustainability or the impact for us is a kind of byproduct of achieving the scale and the commercial return that we want to achieve. So it's always a blend. But yes, I think we're always very happy to talk to and love talking to kind of impact-driven investors who share the same overall mission as us, and we've been lucky enough to meet some great ones over the time. So happy to talk to everyone, but those people, I think, we really see eye to eye with.
Absolutely. And you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. Both can be an outcome here and a positive outcome as you progress. Amazing. And so we're at time. I'd like to thank you, Johnny, for joining me on Bits and Atoms. It was great to have you here today. Thank you again, and I'll let you get back to building.
Thanks, Elias. Thanks for having me.